Hello and welcome wherever you are in the world. If you're lying in the dark with your thoughts gently drifting like waves across the ceiling, know this, you're not alone. Maybe it's past midnight in Oregon and the wind is brushing against the window like a memory you haven't yet named. Or maybe you're in a quiet corner of rural France where the fields are asleep under a moonlit hush. Wherever you are, whenever you are, take a moment to visit the comments and tell us where you're listening, from what time it is, and how you feel tonight. And if this story gently cradles your heart or calms your mind even just a little, please consider leaving a soft like, subscribing, or leaving behind a word of kindness. It helps this sleepy little harbor of history reach other wandering souls, and it means more than you know. Now let your shoulders soften, let your hands rest open, let the breath carry away the noise of the day. You're safe here. You're not expected to remember anything. Just let the images drift in like candlelight on water. Tonight we slip quietly into one of the strangest and most tender stories ever to rise from the wreckage of the sea. A story not about a sinking ship, but about a woman who floated through flame and freezing salt, through one disaster after another, and somehow survived. Her name may not appear in your textbooks, but once she stood among the glittering guests of the Titanic, the ocean liner that thought it was unsinkable. Once she heard the band still playing as the ship tilted toward the stars, and once, barely 3 years later, she stood again on the deck of another vessel, this one full of children, as a torpedo ripped the hull beneath her feet. She survived both, the cold, the chaos, the silence afterward, and in between, the long years of not being believed, of telling people she had lived through what even a single moment of would be unbearable. So tonight we won't just tell her story, we will live it. You will walk in her shoes. You will feel the cold mist touch your eyelashes. You will hear the echo of distant violins, the panicked voices, the splash of lifeboats disappearing into the black. And later the shudder of impact, the tilt of steel, and the impossible question, how many times can a soul be asked to survive? This is not a dream, but it will feel like one. Close your eyes, let's begin. You're standing at the edge of something you can't quite name. The air smells of salt and coal smoke, and the harbor hums with the sounds of farewells. Seagulls wheel and cry overhead, their voices cutting through the chatter of porters and the rattle of trunks. Beneath your feet, the dock vibrates faintly as if the earth itself is anxious. And there she is, the Titanic, stretching into the distance like a floating city, her hull black and massive, swallowing the sky. You feel small beside her, everyone does. Around you, men in top hats murmur to their wives. Children grip their mothers' skirts. Luggage piles up in neat pyramids of leather and brass. Somewhere in the crowd, a band plays a jaunty tune, but it doesn't quite reach your heart. Your name has just been checked against a manifest. You hold your ticket like it's made of gold. It might as well be. And then someone touches your elbow, a familiar warmth. Your husband. His face is calm, but you know his tells the tiny twitch at the corner of his mouth, the way his fingers trace the cuff of his coat. He's excited, nervous, like you. "Ready?" he asks. You nod, even if you're not. There's a ramp sloping up like a bridge into the sky. As you walk it, the crowd behind and the ship ahead seem to blur, and for a moment it feels like you're stepping into a story someone else wrote. The air changes at the threshold, less wind, more warmth, and the faint perfume of varnish and brass polish. Stewards in spotless uniforms smile as they guide you toward your quarters. You walk down corridors lined with wood paneling and electric sconces. The carpet hushes your steps. Your room, second class, is modest but crisp, with a porthole that frames the churning sea like a painting. You unpack slowly. A small leather case, gloves, a white blouse pressed smooth, a photograph of your mother tucked behind a mirror frame. Hours pass in a haze of orientation. A lifeboat drill, a brief tour, a quick nap that doesn't quite let go of you, then dinner. You dress carefully, not for others, for yourself. A deep blue gown with tiny mother-of-pearl buttons. The kind of dress that makes you feel, just for a moment, like the world could open for you. The dining saloon is full of clinking silverware and laughter. You're seated beside a couple from Boston who talk too much about railroads, and a quiet woman traveling alone who smiles often but says little. The food is rich roast beef, wine, jelly, poached salmon, and the air buzzes with conversation. Your husband tells a story about a coal train nearly derailed in Yorkshire, and everyone laughs politely. But your eyes wander to the curved ceiling painted like a summer sky, to the waiters who move like dancers, to the chandeliers that tremble slightly with every engine pulse beneath the floor. And later, much later, you find yourself walking alone along the promenade deck. The stars above are painfully sharp, mirrored in the blackness below. The ship hums gently beneath you, a steady thrum like a heart that never sleeps. Your breath fogs the air. You lean against the railing, not thinking, just being. It's there in that quiet, in that vastness, that something inside you whispers, "This is too perfect." But you hush it, not tonight, not here. Far behind you, laughter floats from an open window. Somewhere below, the engines churn and the great ship surges forward, parting the Atlantic like silk. You don't know it yet, but you're in the glass hall of April 10th, 1912. And soon it will begin to crack. You wake to a softness that doesn't belong to any land. The gentle sway of the sea makes the bed feel like it's breathing beneath you. Outside the porthole, morning light spills across the water in streaks of gold and steel gray. There's no land in sight, just an endless quilt of waves stitched together by wind and sunlight. You sit up slowly. The sheets are crisp. The cabin hums faintly with the rhythm of the ship's heart. You dress in silence, brushing out your hair in slow strokes as your eyes linger on the sky. Today feels like something between a dream and a promise. In the corridor, voices echo, gentle, cheerful, muffled by oak-paneled walls. Someone laughs. A steward rolls a breakfast trolley past, the scent of warm bread and coffee trailing behind him like a ribbon. Your husband is already waiting for you by the staircase, a folded newspaper in one hand and his hat in the other. He smiles, not broadly, but in that quiet way you love, as if smiling were a private act meant only for you. You walk arm in arm to the dining saloon, passing passengers you've begun to recognize. The older couple with matching scarves, the young man who carries a notebook everywhere, the girl with the green ribbon in her hair. Breakfast is soft-boiled eggs, toast, and tea served in delicate porcelain. The table trembles ever so slightly with the movement of the sea, and a salt taste lingers faintly on your lips. You speak little, but you don't need to. Every glance between you and your husband carries years inside it, whole cities of memory, whole countries of meaning. Afterward, you stroll together along the deck. The wind pulls at your coat, crisp and clean. The sea stretches forever, layered in shades of blue that don't exist on land. Children chase one another near the railings. Stewards call out gently to keep back. And behind the laughter, there's that low, constant throb of the engines, like the heartbeat of some sleeping colossus. Your hand rests lightly on the railing. The wood is smooth and cool. Below, the waves rush past in slow, frothy trails. You lean forward, letting the wind comb your hair back, eyes half closed against the brightness. For a moment it feels like flying. That evening the Titanic seems to glow from within. Lights twinkle behind every window. Music drifts from the first-class saloon, a piano and violin weaving together a song you can't name but somehow already know. You linger outside the entrance just long enough to glimpse the glitter of gowns and glassware, the soft rustle of silk, and the glint of laughter polished by champagne. You don't envy them. Not really. Your world is quieter but just as beautiful. Later, you return to your cabin alone. Your husband has gone to smoke and speak with a fellow railway man he met over dinner. You lie down on the bed, still dressed, shoes off, hair loosened. You listen to the creak of the ship, the occasional clang from far below, the hush of water against steel. A lullaby in iron and ocean. And then, for no reason you can name, you rise. You wrap your shawl around your shoulders and walk barefoot across the carpeted floor to the porthole. Outside, the sea is ink-black, flecked with stars. The sky above is cloudless. A full moon hangs just out of view, casting the deck in silver. And there in the distance something flickers. You squint, but it's gone. Just a trick of the light, or a thought you haven't had yet. You press your palm to the glass. It's cold. Beneath your touch, the sea rushes on and on and on. There's no sound but the breathing of the ship. And somewhere deep in your chest, a strange awareness begins to stir, like standing in a cathedral and suddenly feeling how small you are beneath the dome. But still you're warm. You're safe. You're on the grandest ship ever made. And tomorrow you think maybe you'll walk the length of her from prow to stern, just to feel how far you've come. Just to remember the shape of awe. It begins with a sound. Not loud, not violent, just wrong. You're not even sure it wakes you. It's more like your body hears it before your mind does, a shift in the rhythm, a new note in the ship's breathing. A long, drawn-out scrape that trails off into silence. You sit up slowly. The cabin is dark, but not silent. You can hear footsteps above you, the shuffle of hurried boots, the creak of something heavy moving, then faintly voices, calm but clipped. Stewards, perhaps. You glance at the porthole. Nothing but night. Beside you, your husband stirs. He asks if everything's all right, voice low, still caught in sleep. You nod, though you're not certain. Something happened. But the ship isn't listing. The engines still hum beneath your feet. Maybe it was nothing. Still you rise. You slip into your coat, wrap a scarf around your neck, and step into the corridor. Others are doing the same. Doors open. Faces peer out. Some eyes are amused, some annoyed. No one is frightened yet. You climb to the upper deck. The cold hits you like a whispered warning. The air is sharper than it was just hours ago. Crisper. Still. The sea, too, is still, as if holding its breath. Then you see it. A sliver of white fading into the distance behind the ship. Jagged, cold, beautiful. An iceberg. You hear murmurs. A few passengers pointing, speculating. Someone chuckles and says, "So that was it," and everyone relaxes just a little. But then the ship slows. That more than anything unsettles you. The Titanic, grand and unstoppable, easing her pace like a beast unsure of its footing. A steward passes, moving quickly, not stopping to answer questions. Another follows, checking lifeboats. His lantern swings, casting long shadows that sway like ghosts on the walls. You go back inside. By now more passengers are in the corridors. Some dressed, some still in robes. Someone says there's been a message from the bridge. Another says the ship just stopped to check something. No one knows. Everyone pretends to be calm. In your cabin, your husband is already lacing his boots. He looks at you and something passes between you, the truth neither of you says aloud. He takes your hand. There's a knock at the door. A steward with a polite but practiced voice. "If you would please make your way to the boat deck. This is only precautionary. Warm clothes are advised." Precautionary. You nod, thank him, close the door. Then the rush begins. The hallway fills with people. The air changes. Panic hasn't arrived, not yet, but confusion begins to crawl up everyone's back. Children cry. Mothers hush them. Men put on their calmest voices. But the current is shifting. You climb the stairs again. The deck is colder now. The stars shine hard and bright. The lifeboats are being uncovered. Crewmen shout orders into the night. Their voices are firmer now. You are guided to starboard. Lifeboat 11. There's not enough room, not enough boats. The truth hangs in the air like frost. You and your husband stay close. There's no chaos, not yet, but the edges are fraying. A woman refuses to get in without her husband. A man tries to follow her. He is held back gently, then not so gently. And then a hand touches your shoulder. A woman, eyes wide, voice trembling. She holds out a child. "Please, I can't, please just take her." Your arms move before your mind does. The baby is swaddled in wool and silence. Her eyes are closed. Her cheek rests against your coat. You feel the weight of her like an anchor. Your husband looks at you. You look back. No words, just knowing. A voice calls your name. "Step in. Quickly, miss." You hesitate. He nods. The lifeboat rocks as you're lowered. The ropes groan. The deck rises above you, shrinking into shadow. The air is colder here, closer to the water. You hold the child tighter. Around you, the silence deepens. The Titanic looms above, lights still glowing, music still faintly playing. A surreal theater, beautiful and doomed. You do not cry. Not yet. You watch. You listen. And for the second time tonight, the ocean swallows something that cannot be undone. Dot. The water laps at the sides of the lifeboat, slow and steady, like the breathing of something enormous just beneath the surface. You sit, low, knees pressed against the wooden frame, the weight of the sleeping baby still cradled in your arms. Around you, a dozen others shift, murmur, shiver. The boat creaks softly. Oars dip and pull, dip and pull. But the sea is too calm for urgency. Behind you, the ship, still upright, still glowing. It doesn't make sense. You turn your head and your breath catches. The Titanic rises like a floating palace, her lights burning defiantly against the darkness. Her 4 towering smokestacks stretch toward the stars, exhaling only quiet now. There's no fire, no screaming, no tilting mass of doom. Just elegance, wounded perhaps, but still proud. Still unsinkable in the minds of those watching. Someone whispers, "Maybe she'll stay afloat after all." Another voice replies, almost angry, "It's a trick of the eyes." The baby in your arms stirs, then settles again. You look down at her pink cheek against wool, tiny fist curled under her chin. Her breath is warm against your skin. You don't know her name. You don't know if you'll ever find her mother again. A sharp gust cuts through the stillness. You pull your scarf higher, glance toward the other lifeboats. Shapes in the darkness. Some farther out, some nearer, some nearly full. Low voices float between them, carried on the wind. No one shouts. No one sings. The silence is sacred now. And then a sound you'll never forget. It begins deep within the ship, a groan, metallic and long, like a cathedral weeping. A shiver passes through the hull, and then the stern begins to rise. Gasps from the boat. The Titanic is lifting. Not slowly, not all at once, but undeniably. The bow dips forward, swallowed by the ocean. The rear of the ship points toward the stars, almost reverent. You cover the child's face with your shawl. Somewhere someone screams. The music stops, and then as if the ocean finally loses its patience, the great ship breaks. A thunderous crack echoes across the water, loud enough to rattle your bones. Sparks fly, lights flicker and vanish. The Titanic splits in two. The front half dives into the dark like a wounded beast, dragging cables, decks, and dreams with it. The stern hangs in place for one final moment, then follows. Gone. The silence afterward is unbearable. Then the screaming begins. From the water, from the shadows, from throats not built to cry like this. Men and women flailing in the Black Sea. Faces illuminated by moonlight and desperation. Their arms reach toward you, toward anything. Wood, rope, a prayer. A man swims close, eyes wide, fingers clawing the side of your lifeboat. Someone moves to help him. Another voice says, "If we pull too many in, we'll tip." You freeze. The baby sleeps on unaware. The man slips beneath the surface. You will dream about his face for years. You press the child tighter against your chest, trying not to sob. Not here. Not now. More voices, some screaming, some fading, some no longer heard. The sky above is brutal in its beauty. Stars burn silently. The moon remains still. And all around you, chaos now quieting. Fewer cries, fewer splashes. The sea closes over the night like a blanket pulled too tight. You are one of the lucky ones. You wish you weren't. You do not speak. No one in the boat does. You just drift away from what was toward what will never be the same. The cold creeps in. But still the child breathes. And you keep her warm. You do not let go. The sun takes its time returning. It's not the gentle sunrise you'd imagined. There's no golden wash across a calm sea, no cinematic promise of safety. Instead, it creeps upward behind a veil of pale clouds, casting a cold gray light over the water. You open your eyes to it slowly, not because you're rested, but because you never truly slept. The baby is still in your lap, impossibly warm for one so small. Her breath fogs slightly in the morning chill. You glance around the lifeboat. The others are silent, wrapped in whatever coats and blankets they manage to bring. One man has frost in his mustache. A woman rocks herself in tiny, compulsive motions. A boy sits with his chin on his knees, staring straight ahead as if afraid to look anywhere else. The sea is glass. No waves, no wind. Only the sound of distant crying and the creak of oarlocks, slow and steady. Farther out, other lifeboats dot the surface like forgotten thoughts. Some are crowded, others oddly empty. A few sit low in the water, dangerously so. One is upside down. You count the boats, then stop. It doesn't matter. Not here. Not now. There's a moment, a fragile one, where you think this might be it. That rescue won't come. That the Titanic has already taken everything it could and left the rest of you to vanish beneath the same sky. But just then, someone in the boat raises a hand. There, they say, voice cracked and dry. Smoke. You turn. And there on the horizon, barely more than a smudge against the sky, a ship. Tiny, distant, moving. The Carpathia. Relief doesn't come like a flood. It arrives slowly, suspiciously, like a stranger you don't quite trust yet. You watch the black smudge grow larger, then resolve into a ship's silhouette, then unmistakably into salvation. The mood in the lifeboat shifts. Someone begins to cry. A man clutches his wedding ring like it's the only thing anchoring him to the world. Another whispers thank you again and again to no one in particular. But you just hold the child. The Carpathia draws nearer. Ropes are lowered, ladders, slings. Crew members shout instructions down. Your boat nudges up against her hull. Rough hands reach over the side. One by one, your boat is emptied. When it's your turn, you pass the child up first. She's lifted in a canvas sling, then cradled by a woman in a dark coat with kind eyes. Then you climb. Each rung of the rope ladder burns your frozen hands, but you don't stop. You don't look down. Once on deck, everything becomes too bright, too loud. Blankets are pressed into your arms. A hot drink appears. You're led into a small cabin that smells of wet wool, salt, and something boiling. Steam clouds the windows. People are speaking names, cabin numbers, questions, but it all sounds like water over stone. You sit, and suddenly it hits you. You're not cold anymore. You're not sinking. You're alive. But your husband isn't beside you. You rise, moving without permission from your legs. You scan the crowd, the women with ash-smudged cheeks, the children clutching strangers, the men staring into nothing. He's not here. You check again and again. Someone asks your name. You tell them. They ask who you were traveling with. You tell them that too. They write it down. Then they put a gentle hand on your shoulder, not to comfort, to steady, to keep you from collapsing. You don't remember sitting again, but somehow you're in a chair. A blanket is around your shoulders. A teacup rests in your hands, full but untouched. The baby sleeps in a bassinet beside you. The Carpathia moves forward, the sea behind her is quiet, and somewhere out there in the endless gray are the last bubbles of the Titanic dot. Days pass, though you don't feel them. Time aboard the Carpathia unfolds like mist, shapeless without beginning or end. You drift through it in a kind of quiet shock, your senses dulled, your thoughts flickering like candlelight in a draught. Sleep comes in shallow waves. Food tastes like nothing. The walls of the ship feel too narrow, too still, and every creak in the floorboards echoes with memories of rushing water and breaking steel. You are given a shared cabin with 3 other women, strangers, survivors. One of them lost her sister. Another hasn't spoken since the rescue. The third combs her hair over and over as if untangling it might rewind time. The child is kept nearby. The Carpathia's nurse tends to her during the day, but you return to her every night. You sit by her bassinet and stroke her tiny fingers, willing her to remember warmth, to forget the cold. There are lists now, typed on crisp paper pinned near the stairwells, lists of the rescued, names inked in columns. Some names have check marks, others have questions beside them, some are simply marked with a cross. You search for your husband's name every morning, and every morning it is not there. One evening you're called up to the deck. The sea is calm again. The air is warmer now, tinged with the scent of approaching land. Passengers stand in small, hunched groups, not talking, just being. You join them, standing at the railing. Ahead, the silhouette of New York is beginning to form, hazy and distant, like a dream someone else once told you. But before landfall, the Carpathia stops. There's a service on deck. A prayer is read in several languages. A bell tolls. Someone sings quietly. Flowers are released into the sea, white lilies, yellow roses, whatever could be found on board. They float gently, clustering together, before slowly scattering apart. You watch them until the last petal disappears into the waves. When the ship moves again, no one claps, no one cheers. You arrive in New York under a curtain of rain. Reporters swarm the docks. Their cameras click like insects. Questions fly. What did you see? How many were lost? Is it true the ship broke in half? You say nothing. You walk down the gangway carrying the child, a nurse by your side. No one knows who the girl belongs to. You write down what little you remember: the mother's eyes, her shawl, her voice, and you leave it with the authorities. They promise to do everything they can, but deep inside you already know. You kiss the child on the forehead one last time and whisper something only she can hear. Then you let her go. You find a boarding house near the harbor. The room is small, with thin walls and a crooked window that looks out onto a brick alley. You sit on the edge of the bedcote, still on, hat still damp with rain. You remove your shoes slowly, as if your feet don't belong to you anymore. Then you lie down fully dressed and stare at the ceiling. For the first time there are no sounds of waves, no groaning steel, no distant cries, only silence. And in that silence the weight returns, not just of your soaked clothes or your tired bones, but of everything you left in the water, everything you couldn't carry. You whisper his name once, just once. Then you let it fall into the stillness like a stone sinking in a calm sea dot. The days blur. Not from speed, but from sameness. You wake each morning in the boarding house to the creak of footsteps on the floor above, and the sharp whistle of the radiator struggling to bring warmth into the cold, thin-walled room. You boil water on a tiny iron stove. You drink tea that tastes like metal. You look out the window at the alley where shadows shift but never change, and then you sit, for hours, for days, sometimes with a newspaper folded across your lap, sometimes with your hands still in your coat pockets, sometimes doing nothing at all. There is no funeral, no body, no certainty. Only a telegram that finally comes, 4 lines, blunt as a stone, no further word. Regret to inform, presumed lost, deepest condolences. You read it once, you never touch it again, and still the world moves on. On the streets below, children play with marbles. Women carry baskets of bread and potatoes. A man sharpens knives on the corner and whistles while he works. The papers move on to new headlines. New ships, new kings. The Titanic shrinks in the public eye, becomes a story, then a symbol, then a footnote. But you are still adrift. You try to write a letter to his parents. You begin 4 of them. None finish. Words fail you. You don't know how to say he vanished in silence, that you survived something that refuses to end. One afternoon you go walking, not far, just through the docks. You pass crates being loaded, ropes being coiled, men shouting across ship rails. The air smells of oil and old fish, and somewhere in the distance a foghorn moans. You pause at the edge of the wharf and look out at the sea, not the North Atlantic, not the dark place you left behind, but water nonetheless. It glints under the sun like 1,000 broken mirrors. You imagine what lies below. Not just wreckage, but wedding rings, photographs, empty shoes, silver watches still ticking in the dark. You close your eyes and try to hear his voice. Just for a moment. But all you hear is wind. Later that week, you attend a gathering of survivors. They meet in a church basement, sitting in folding chairs, hands in their laps. Some share stories, others just listen. A young woman stands and recounts how her fiancé was last seen helping others into lifeboats. An elderly man describes the sound of the band playing as the ship tilted. A child speaks of how her mother's coat smelled like lavender, even in the lifeboat. You do not speak. You just sit there breathing in the quiet grief of strangers who carry the same weight you do. For the first time since that night, you do not feel entirely alone. But even still, when you return to your room and close the door behind you, the loneliness returns. Not loud, not sudden, just steady, like a tide that rises whether or not you're ready for it. You take off your shoes, your coat, your scarf. You hang the coat by the window where it still smells faintly of sea salt. And then, without knowing why, you light a candle. Not electric, not modern. A single flame. You watch it flicker in the draft. You watch it bend and right itself over and over. And for the first time in weeks, you cry. Not the kind of crying people can see. Not the kind that sounds like pain. Just tears, soft and silent, falling onto your hands like rain onto stone. You do not stop them. You let them fall. Because this, too, is a kind of survival. The city grows louder as spring unfolds. Streetcars screech down iron tracks. Vendors call out over crates of oranges and tin cups of steaming broth. Rain comes often now, but quickly, like arguments that pass without apology. New York stretches and shifts, indifferent to your presence. Every day it seems someone new arrives, a man with a violin case, a woman with too many bags, children clinging to shawls as if they were lifelines. And yet you remain still. You haven't returned to England. The thought of crossing the Atlantic again sits like lead in your chest. You've written to your family brief, factual letters that say little, but assure them you are alive. They write back with love, with invitations, with worry. You do not respond. Instead, you walk the streets. Not to get anywhere. Just to feel the ground beneath your feet. Just to hear footsteps that aren't your own. You pass bookstores, cafes, churches, and tailor shops, each one full of people with lives still unbroken. The world spins on its axis without noticing the absence you carry. One evening you find yourself near the Hudson. The water ripples silver under a dying sun. You sit on a bench near the docks, gloved hands folded in your lap. Children play with sticks in the mud. A tugboat groans past, dragging its wake behind it like a scarf. You watch the river and remember the baby girl, her breath on your neck, her tiny fingers around your thumb. You never knew her name, you never asked. You regret that. The sound of footsteps draws your attention. A man older with a limp and a newspaper tucked beneath his arm settles on the bench beside you. He doesn't speak. You don't look at him. Minutes pass in silence. Then, without turning, he says, "You from the ship?" It takes you a moment to respond. When you do, it's only a nod. He says nothing more, just nods back. Eventually, he rises. Before he leaves, he places the newspaper on the bench between you. It's folded to a story on page 3. A senator has begun hearings into the Titanic sinking. Questions swirl about lifeboat capacity, crew preparedness, the captain's final decisions. You read it through twice, not because you expect answers, but because it proves, if only for a little while, that the world still remembers. Back in your room, you pin the article to the wall. You begin to collect others. Small clippings, survivor interviews, sketches of the wreckage, a diagram of the ship's interior. You tape them near the window, arranging them like constellations in a private sky. Not to understand, not to investigate, but to remember, to hold what others might let fade. Some nights you light the candle again. It flickers gently beside your teacup. You write in a small notebook, nothing structured, just thoughts, phrases, images. The scrape against the hull, the stars over the lifeboat, the man who sank without a sound. You write about the moment the ship split, not with anger or drama, but with a kind of awe, as if you had watched the earth shift beneath your feet and somehow lived to tell it. You do not share these writings, not yet. But slowly something stirs. Not healing, not recovery, just movement. One day you volunteer at a hospital. At first they assign you to folding linens, later to reading aloud in the convalescent ward. Your voice is soft but steady. You read from poetry collections, from newspapers, even from the backs of soup cans when nothing else is available. The patients smile. Some nod off while you speak. For the first time in weeks, your voice feels useful. One nurse begins to ask about your past. You don't answer. Another calls you the quiet English one and leaves it at that. You prefer it that way. But one evening as you're leaving the ward, a child tugs your sleeve. A girl perhaps 6 or 7 with tangled hair and eyes too old for her face. She says you talk like the lady who went on the ship. You freeze. She doesn't wait for a reply. She just slips her hand into yours and walks with you to the door, saying nothing more. And in that moment, that tiny, wordless gesture, you feel something you thought was gone forever. Connection. Life like a trickle of warm tea returning to your fingertips. You squeeze her hand gently. You don't speak. You don't need to. The notebook fills slowly. Each page bears the weight of silence, of moments too heavy for speech but too vivid to forget. You write not as a way to remember, but because remembering is unavoidable. It lives in your bones, in your dreams, in the stillness between footsteps. The pencil moves almost on its own, scratching out lines that feel like breathing underwater. Sometimes you write about the night itself. Other times about the way grief hides in daylight. About how the city forgets you on purpose, and how that forgetting makes it easier to vanish into the crowd. There are no dates, only scenes. A rope ladder cutting into your palms. The smell of coal smoke just before sunrise. The cold, sharp taste of seawater on your lips when you thought you'd never reach the lifeboat. You keep the notebook beneath your pillow, and then one morning you wake and know it's time to leave. Not forever, not with finality, just away. The boarding house is too still now. You know the pattern of every squeaky floorboard. The exact pitch of the door hinges the way the faucet sticks when turned left. These small certainties, once comforting, have begun to trap you, like the ship's walls once did, narrowing around you as if preparing for descent. You pack your few things: a coat, a dress, the notebook, a photograph of you and your husband taken in the spring before the crossing, both of you standing in front of a rose bush half smiling. You tuck it into the inside pocket of your case. There's a train station not far from the river. You buy a one-way ticket to Boston. The train is slow. You sit by the window, forehead resting against cool glass, watching forests and villages slide by in a wash of gray and green. The trees are still bare from winter. Smoke from farmhouse chimneys curls upward in thin ribbons. Somewhere a dog runs alongside the tracks for a moment before vanishing behind a fence. No one sits beside you. You're grateful for that. You arrive just after sunset. The city smells of salt and rain and old bricks. A woman at the station recommends a boarding house near the harbor. The landlady is older, sharp-eyed, but kind. She gives you a room at the end of a narrow hall with floral wallpaper and a view of a crooked alley. The bed sags in the middle. The radiator hisses. You sleep like stone. Boston feels slower than New York. Its streets curve oddly. Its buildings lean close together like old friends keeping secrets. You walk them quietly, tracing the edges of a place you've never known, but feels somehow familiar. You take small jobs, transcribing letters for a shipping office, sorting files in the dusty back room of a maritime museum. They pay little but ask fewer questions. You keep your hair pinned up. You wear the same coat every day. People forget your name. You let them. At the museum, a curator once asks if you've ever been on a ship. You pause, then say only once. She nods, not pushing further. One afternoon, while sorting a box of items donated by a retired sailor, you find a postcard. Its yellowed edges curling the ink faded to a soft brown. The image is of the Titanic in full profile. Elegant, immense, impossible. You hold it lightly between your fingers. A feeling rises, not sharp or painful, but deep, like looking at a childhood home in a dream. You slip it into your notebook. That night you light the candle again. Its flame dances in the dim room. You open the notebook and begin a new page. You write. There are two kinds of silence, the one that suffocates and the one that finally lets you breathe. You underline it. The wind taps gently at the window. A dog barks far off in the street. Your tea goes cold untouched, but the words remain warm in your hand. You close the notebook, blow out the candle, and let the darkness hold you, not as something to fear, but as something that understands. Spring turns to summer with little fanfare. The harbor air grows heavier, filled with the scent of fish iron and salt. Seagulls wheel overhead in lazy spirals. The afternoons stretch long and golden, and in the evenings light lingers on the cobblestones like it's reluctant to go. You spend your days moving between the museum and your room, the notebook never far from your hand. Its pages multiply, your handwriting growing more certain, less fragile. Sometimes you write memories, sometimes dreams, sometimes small silent conversations with your husband, questions you never asked, answers you imagine he might have given. These pages are yours alone. You never read them aloud. At the museum you begin to catalog artifacts. Sextants, faded flags, rusted flares. A chipped plate with the White Star Line emblem. You hold it carefully, feeling the weight of something once ordinary now made sacred by survival. Your supervisor notices your care, your quiet reverence, and asks you to curate a small exhibit about maritime disasters. You accept without a word. You never mention your connection. You don't need to. The exhibit opens in August, modest, tucked into a quiet corner near the stairwell. Visitors wander through it slowly, pausing at photographs of broken masts, torn lifeboats, yellowed maps. One case holds a child's shoe, black leather, barely scuffed. Another contains a set of binoculars, cracked, missing the strap, found floating after the wreck of the General Slocum. People read the placards, murmur to one another, move on. But occasionally someone lingers. You watch them through the corner of your eye. A young woman who clutches her shawl tighter. A man who wipes his eyes before pretending to study a compass. You never approach. You just watch. And sometimes in those quiet moments you feel your own pain ease, just slightly, shared however unknowingly by another. Then one morning something shifts. You're sitting behind the museum's front desk, sorting receipts, when a letter arrives. No return address. Inside a newspaper clipping, and a single line handwritten in blue ink. She is safe with her aunt, Vermont. You read it once, then again. It takes a moment for the truth to land. The child, the baby from the lifeboat. She lived. You press the clipping to your chest, eyes closing. The breath you take afterward feels deeper than any in weeks. You don't know who sent the note. You don't need to. In this one line there is closure, a door gently swinging shut without a sound. That night you return to the harbor. You walk alone along the edge of the pier where ropes creak and boats rock gently against wooden posts. The moon is high. The sea below reflects it like a mirror broken only by ripples. The air tastes like salt and smoke, and something older. You sit on a bench, the same kind of bench you sat on in New York that day after the telegram came. But tonight the weight is different. Not gone, but bearable. You take out the notebook. You open to the final page, and you write, "Survival is not the absence of pain, but the choice to live with it." You underline that too. A breeze tugs at your coat. You close the notebook and press your hand against it. Somewhere across the water a ship's horn calls out low, long, lonely. But for the first time you do not flinch. You rise. You walk back toward the lights of the city, the stone beneath your shoes warm from the day's sun, the sounds of laughter drifting from a nearby tavern. You pass through it all like mist, part of the world again, not separate from it. And though no one turns to look, though no voice calls your name, though the shadows lengthen, you are here. You are here. You are still here. The world forgets faster than the heart. By autumn, fewer people speak of the ship. Headlines move on. Wars loom on the edges of conversation. Machines grow louder, buildings taller, and the pace of life accelerates like a train leaving the station without waiting for you to catch up. But deep within your own quiet orbit you move differently, slowly, deliberately. As if time once shattered has had to be stitched back together by hand. You develop a routine. Each morning you walk to the harbor before the city wakes. The air is cooler now, the gulls quieter. You sit on a bench, the same one, and sip tea from a tin mug. The sea breathes its long rhythmic breath, a sound that both soothes and startles depending on the morning. At the museum your exhibit receives a modest mention in a local paper. The journalist calls it elegant and reverent, a meditation on loss without spectacle. They don't know who you are. The article doesn't name you. Still, when you read it you feel a small warmth gather in your chest. You begin writing elsewhere longer pieces. Essays, though you don't call them that. You give them titles like After the Water or How the Light Looked Before the Break. You type them on the museum's machine after hours when the halls are empty and the floorboards speak only to you. One night, while filing some maritime documents, you find a box labeled Unclaimed. Inside are photographs from ships long gone. One catches your eye, a blurry image of a woman on a lifeboat. Her face turned slightly from the camera, a shawl draped over her shoulders, something small cradled in her arms. You don't know if it's you. You can't be sure, but you hold the photo for a long time. Eventually you make a copy and slip it into your notebook. That winter the snow arrives late. It falls in soft bursts, painting the city in white silence. The museum grows colder. Fewer visitors come. On one of those quiet days a school group arrives. The children chatter and shuffle their feet as they file through the exhibits. One boy, small and wide-eyed, stops in front of your Titanic display. He reads every word. Then he turns to you and asks, "Did anyone actually survive?" You pause, and then for the first time you say it out loud. "Yes, some did." He nods satisfied. He doesn't ask for more. He simply says, "That's good." before moving on to the next display where a bell once used aboard a mail steamer hangs behind glass. You remain still for a long time after he's gone. That evening, as snow taps softly on the windows, you sit at your writing desk and pull out a fresh sheet of paper. You write a new title, The Woman Who Survived. You stare at the words, letting them settle. They feel strange but right, like a coat you once thought lost found again in the back of a wardrobe, its scent still familiar. You don't write the rest of the piece that night. You just let the title rest there on the desk beside the candle and the photo and the cold cup of tea. And you realize this is the first time you've thought of yourself that way. Not the woman who lost, not the woman who waited, but the woman who survived. And somehow in that naming something shifts. The room feels warmer. The silence feels gentler. You exhale, and for the first time in a long time it doesn't hurt to breathe. You begin to write at night. Not because the words arrive more easily after dark, they don't, but because the silence is more forgiving. The city grows quiet after midnight, and in that quiet your thoughts unfold without resistance. The candle burns lower each evening, casting long shadows on the walls. Your pen scratches steadily across the page, sometimes slow and deliberate, other times quick and trembling, like the thoughts have been waiting too long to get out. You write about things you haven't spoken aloud. The way the lifeboat rocked in the dark, the sound of a man's last breath beneath the water, the moment your fingers brushed your husband's coat as you were lowered from the deck and you didn't reach back in time. No one reads these pages. Not yet. But they are becoming a shape, a story, not for the world, maybe not ever, but for you. A map of pain and memory and strange quiet strength. At the museum your tasks shift. You're asked to give occasional talks to students, brief, factual, impersonal. You describe how a compass works, the purpose of a ship's telegraph, how navigation was done before radio. You keep your voice steady, your hands still. The children listen, the teachers thank you. But sometimes one of them lingers. A boy asks if ships really disappear without warning. A girl asks what it feels like to be the last one off a boat. A teacher after class quietly says her brother was lost at sea. You answer carefully, not as an expert, as a witness. And slowly your voice becomes something others lean into. One afternoon you receive a letter, typed, formal, from a publisher in New York. Someone you still don't know who sent them a portion of your writings. Not the whole notebook, just a few pages. Enough to catch attention. Enough to make someone wonder, who is this woman? The letter asks if you'd consider expanding your thoughts into a memoir. You read it 3 times, then fold it, then leave it on the desk for a week without touching it again. You're not ready. Not yet. But the idea lingers. A few days later, you take the train to a nearby town, just to get away from the sea, just for one day. The trees are red and gold now, and the sky has that clear, crisp quality of October. You walk slowly without direction. You sit in a cafe and watch people read newspapers. Kiss cheeks, brush crumbs from coats. Normal life. It's not something you envy. It's something you study, like a foreign language. You return to the museum that evening to find a small parcel waiting. No name, no note. Inside, a child's drawing. Crayon on folded paper. 2 people in a boat under a sky full of stars. One figure has yellow hair, the other holds a baby. You smile. It's from the little girl at the hospital months ago, the one who took your hand. You pin it to the wall beside your bed. That night you write in your notebook, "We survive in pieces." And sometimes strangers carry the parts we've lost until we are strong enough to hold them again. You close the book gently. Then you stand by the window. Outside, the harbor glows under moonlight. The masts of docked ships sway like tall shadows in sleep. Somewhere out there, beyond all the lights and cold and silence, the wreck still rests at the bottom of the sea. But tonight you do not dread it. You do not fear it. You simply carry it as part of your story. Not the end, just one chapter. And for the first time you whisper, not to anyone, not even to yourself, but to the sky, "I'm still here." And the stars in their quiet way seem to nod. You accept the publisher's invitation. Not right away. You hesitate for weeks. The letter stays folded on your desk beneath a smooth stone you once found on a beach in Maine. Gray and oval, with a line of white quartz running through it like a scar. You touch the stone often as you think about what it means to remember, about what it means to let others hear the sound of your memories. But eventually you reply. You send only what feels true, nothing more, nothing less. No embellishments, no grand narratives, just the soft, fragile texture of what it's like to survive something that tried to take your name from the world. You include a few pages from your notebook. You leave out the rest. They respond with warmth. The editor calls your writing quiet thunder. You smile at that. Not because it's clever, but because it feels exactly right. Like the sound of the ship breaking in the dark, like the silence that followed. They ask if you'd consider visiting New York, meeting in person, talking through what the book could become. You say yes. The train to New York rattles softly through forests and towns blurred by frost. You bring your notebook, your shawl, your worn leather case. You wear the navy blue dress, the one you wore the night you boarded the Titanic. It still fits. Looser now. Time and memory have softened it, but it still holds its shape. When you arrive at the office, the editor is younger than you expected. Sharp-eyed, soft-voiced. She doesn't ask questions right away. She simply offers tea, then lets the room breathe. You talk about structure, tone, truth. You discuss what to include and what to leave behind. You mention names without giving them fully. She never presses. When you speak of the moment the lights went out, she nods. Not because she knows, but because she understands that knowing isn't the point. You return to Boston with a contract in your bag and a small advance tucked between its pages. Not much, but enough to pay rent for a few months, enough to make time to write. You begin. At first the words resist, but you've learned to be patient with pain. You no longer force memory to behave. You let it drift to the surface on its own, like the face of a man rising in water not quite reaching light. You write by candlelight most nights. The city outside your window grows dim earlier now. Winter is settling in. The harbor ices at the edges. Ships move slower, their horns more hollow. You wrap yourself in wool and wait for sentences to arrive like footsteps outside your door. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you wait all night. But sometimes they come in waves, not of sorrow, but of clarity. You write about the music you heard as the ship tilted, the way the violin cut through the noise like a thread of gold through soot. You write about the cold, yes, but also about the warmth of the lifeboat, not physical warmth, but the heat of holding another life against your own, willing it to survive. You write about silence, how it filled your ears long after the sea was calm, how it became a companion. Your editor sends kind letters, gentle guidance. She tells you not to worry about deadlines. Some truths move at their own pace, she writes. Let them. You walk more often now. Through the streets of Boston, along the harbor, even in the snow. You carry no umbrella, let the flakes collect on your coat like ash. People rush past you in boots and scarves, laughing, shouting, living. You walk through them like fog. One morning a woman stops you. Middle-aged hat, crooked coat, buttoned wrong. You were on the ship, weren't you? She asks, eyes searching your face. You hesitate. Then nod. She smiles, but there's sorrow in it. My grandfather was too. Didn't make it. I was just a girl when I learned. But we never forgot. You say nothing. Just reach out, gently touch her hand. That night you add something to your manuscript. A single sentence. Grief doesn't end, it transforms. You underline it twice. Then you light your candle, pour your tea, and continue. You write until the flame burns low and the moon slips behind clouds. And this time, when you lay your head down, you sleep through the night. You mail the final manuscript on a morning thick with fog. The city feels hushed, as if holding its breath with you. You walk to the post office alone, the package tucked under your arm, wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Your name is written small in the corner, your handwriting careful, as if it could somehow soften what the pages contain. When the clerk takes it from your hands and sets it on the scale, you feel something slip free inside your chest. Not loss, not relief. Something gentler, like setting a lantern into the river and watching it float away. The book is titled simply Below the Silence. The publisher sends word weeks later, a release date, a cover design, a modest print run. There is quiet interest, they say. You smile. Quiet interest is all you've ever hoped for. You don't tell anyone, not your neighbors, not the curator at the museum, not the librarian who knows your tea order. You carry the news like a secret between you and the sea. Winter deepens. The harbor freezes at its edges. Smoke climbs from chimneys and hangs low in the streets. You begin volunteering again at the hospital, mostly reading aloud. Patients recognize your voice before your face now. You choose your stories carefully. Short poems, soft chapters. No storms, no sinking. One evening, a nurse hands you an envelope with no return address. Inside is a photograph. The baby. Older now, perhaps 5, maybe 6, standing in a snowy yard beside a woman with kind eyes and graying hair. The child is bundled in a heavy coat, a red scarf trailing down one side. She is smiling, a broad, fearless grin. On the back, her name is Evelyn. She sings constantly. You hold the photograph against your chest for a long time. Then you frame it and place it on your nightstand. You walk more often now, even in the snow. The cold no longer stings. It reminds you of the sea, yes, but no longer of the dark. Only of memory, of survival. When the book is published, it arrives in a small box of author copies, 10 of them, stacked like quiet promises. You run your fingers over the cover. The paper is smooth. Your name is printed in soft gray ink. You open to the first page and read the dedication. For those who floated in the dark and waited for light. You donate a copy to the museum without saying a word. The curator displays it beneath a lifeboat diagram. Visitors pause there longer than you expect. Some lean closer to read the inside flap. Others simply stand in silence. You watch them from a distance, hidden in plain sight. A letter arrives from the editor. The book has reached London, then Paris, then Berlin. Modest reviews appear. One calls it a meditation on memory shaped by water. Another says the prose is as quiet and devastating as the ocean itself. You reread the letters only once, then you place them in a drawer and return to your notebook. Not to write a sequel, but because the writing no longer needs an audience. It has become the way you breathe. One night, while shelving books at the museum, a small group of students enters. One boy lingers near the Titanic exhibit. He reads everything. His friend calls him over, but he doesn't move. You step closer. He glances at you, then points to a photograph. "Did she really survive?" he asks wide-eyed. You nod. He considers that, then says, "I think she was probably really brave." You think of your hands shaking on the lifeboat rope, of how you cried silently into the baby's shawl, of how long it took to speak his name again. You say, "I think she was really human." He grins, shrugs, and runs to catch up with his classmates. And you stand there a moment longer, then turn out the lights, lock the case, and step into the winter night. The stars blink down sharp and quiet, and somewhere far below the surface of the sea the wreck still sleeps. But above it, here on land, a woman walks steadily into the snow. Alive, still walking, still warm. Spring returns not as a burst of green, but as a gradual loosening. Ice recedes from the harbor's edge, pigeons gather again on the roof lines, the wind still bites, but with less certainty. You find yourself waking earlier, drawn to the way the light filters through the lace curtain over your window, soft like memory, like breath on glass. You continue your routines, museum, harbor, tea writing, but they begin to feel less like rituals and more like choice. The days no longer feel like something to survive. They feel lived. Your book continues its quiet journey. Letters arrive from strangers, some typed, some handwritten, some with flowers pressed between the pages. A woman from Nova Scotia writes to say her grandmother never spoke of the ship, but after reading your words, she cried for the first time in decades. A man from Ireland tells you he lost someone that night, and for the first time he feels like he understands what they might have felt. You keep these letters in a wooden box beneath your bed. You don't reread them often. Just knowing they exist is enough. One afternoon you're invited to speak. Not to a crowd, just to a small reading circle at the city library. They've chosen your book for the month. You consider declining, but the librarian, a gentle man with spectacles and ink on his fingertips, assures you it will be informal, quiet, just a conversation. Nothing dramatic, he promises. You say yes. When the day arrives, you wear the gray dress, the one with the subtle pattern like falling snow. You tie your hair back. You bring nothing but yourself. The room is small. 12 people seated in a circle of wooden chairs. Their faces are kind, curious. No one interrupts. No one tries to lead. They simply ask, "What did it feel like to write it?" You think before answering. Then you say it felt like remembering with both hands. A woman to your right nods, tears gathering but not falling. You see something in her expression, a recognition maybe. The way survivors can sometimes identify each other without needing details. The hour passes gently. You read a short passage aloud. Your voice trembles once, but no one flinches. When it's done, there's no applause. Just silence, the good kind, the kind that says, "We heard you." When you leave, the librarian thanks you with both hands. The walk home is quiet. The city glows in late afternoon light, soft gold on brick and stone. You pass a bakery and pause to inhale the scent of fresh bread. Children race past on bicycles. A woman sings softly in her window while hanging laundry. Life blooming again. That night you visit the harbor once more. You sit on the same bench beneath the same iron lamp, now flickering slightly in the wind. You look out across the water, now dotted with fishing boats, sails furled and quiet. The moon rises slowly behind thin clouds. You open your notebook. You write, "I once thought survival was the end of the story. But it's the beginning. The quiet, aching, beautiful beginning." You pause. Then you write one more line. "And I forgive the sea." You close the notebook gently, and you realize it is not just memory you've been carrying. It is love. Love in the shape of grief. Love in the shape of silence. Love in the shape of a lifeboat cutting through black water, holding nothing but breath and hope. The sea is calm tonight. You sit for a long time watching its stillness, not waiting for anything, just grateful to have arrived. The letter arrives in early June. No return address. The envelope is cream-colored, thick with handwriting that leans slightly to the left. You hesitate before opening it. In your hands it feels like a stone pulled from deep water, familiar in its weight, unknown in its meaning. Inside a single sheet. My mother was on the ship too. She never spoke of it. But after reading your book, I think she didn't need to. Thank you for saying what she couldn't. Below a name you don't recognize. No signature, just initials LEH. You stare at the paper for a long time, then fold it carefully and slide it into the wooden box beneath your bed. These letters no longer open wounds. They close them, one after another, stitch by stitch. You continue writing not for anyone now, but because it feels like breathing. Notebooks piled gently on your shelf, quiet, undemanding. In them you write memories, yes, but also things you never imagined you'd live to witness. Children chasing bubbles across a cobblestone square. A woman laughing at her own joke. The exact shade of lavender in the sky after a summer storm. There's a joy in your writing now. Not loud or bright, but steady like the rhythm of oars in calm water. At the museum, the Titanic exhibit is quietly expanded. They add a case of personal stories, excerpts from survivors' letters and interviews. The curator asks if they may include a page from your notebook. You choose one carefully, not the page with the scream or the sound of the ship splitting, but the one with the baby's breath warm on your chest while the world ended around her. Visitors pause longest at that case. You stand nearby sometimes, anonymous, watching them. One young couple holds hands tightly. An older woman wipes her eyes with a lace handkerchief. A boy whispers, "Did this really happen?" And his father nods, eyes wide, voice soft. "It did." And you feel not pride but peace. One afternoon as you're leaving, the curator stops you. He smiles awkwardly, holds out a sealed envelope. "This came for you," he says. "No name, just said to leave it here." You nod and take it home. Inside a photograph, faded edges soft. A man in a dark coat standing beside a railway platform holding a suitcase. His mouth is half smiling. His eyes look just past the camera. Your breath catches. It's him, your husband. You know the image. It was taken the day before you boarded the ship, but you lost your copy years ago, or so you thought. Tucked behind the photo, a note. "I found this among my grandfather's things. He always kept it in a box marked, 'The one who got away.' I think it was for you." There's no name, only that. You place the photograph on your writing desk. Light from the window catches on its surface, makes it seem alive for a moment. You sit for a long time just looking. That evening you light the candle. You open your notebook, and you write, "He never came back, but somehow he never left." Then without thinking you write another line. "And I no longer need to carry him in sorrow. I carry him in sunlight." You close the book gently. Outside the sea is quiet again, the tide rising soft as breath. In the distance a foghorn sounds low, steady, the kind that says, "I'm here, I'm still moving, I have not been lost." And you smile, because for the first time in years you believe it. You grow older, not suddenly, not all at once. It happens gently, like the changing of light across a room. Your hands begin to remember the weight of time, the ache in your knuckles after writing, the way your steps slow when climbing stairs. The mirror becomes softer with each passing year. You don't resist it. Age, you've learned, is another kind of journey. Your hair turns silver. People call you ma'am with a respectful softness. Children offer their seats on trams. You smile and thank them. Some days your memory stumbles, a name misplaced, a key forgotten. But the memories that matter stay vivid. The lifeboat sway, the violin in the dark, the breath of a baby against your neck. The museum retires your exhibit quietly. You don't mind. It had its time. Artifacts are stored, glass cases, cleaned labels rewritten. History moves as it must. You pack up your desk box, your notebooks, and say your farewells. The curator hugs you gently. There's a plaque for you in the reading room, your name etched into brass beneath the words, "In reverent memory of silence made visible." You walk home slowly that day. Not because you are sad, but because you want to remember the sound of your shoes on the old stone streets. The seagulls calling overhead. The way the wind curves around the bakery corner and carries the scent of rye and cloves. That night you write one last time in the notebook. Just a single line. "The sea gave me back to myself." Then you close it. You place it atop the others on the shelf, all lined neatly like books in a personal tide. Seasons turn. You spend your days in smaller circles now, watering your window garden, tending to a stray cat who visits each morning, writing letters in longhand to readers you'll never meet. You bake when your hands allow it. You reread old novels and mark the margins with new thoughts. You watch the harbor change colors from gray to gold to sapphire to steel. Sometimes you speak aloud to your husband. Only short things. I saw a boat today with your name on it. Or there's frost on the glass again. You'd hate it. You don't expect answers. You never did. But the silence that follows feels kind now. Familiar. Like someone listening. One afternoon, a young woman knocks at your door. She wears a red scarf. There's something in her eyes, a brightness, a depth. She introduces herself simply. Evelyn. She's visiting the city. She found your book. She thought maybe it could be you. You ask her in. You make tea. She speaks of Vermont, of her aunt, of a photograph she still keeps of herself as a baby bundled in wool passed into the arms of a stranger beneath a sky full of stars. You nod. You show her the notebook. The framed photo of her smile sent years ago. She touches it with quiet awe. You don't cry. You simply place your hand on hers and let the moment pass between you, full of all the things that don't need to be said. That night after she leaves, you sit by the window. The harbor glows with city lights. A soft fog drifts over the water. You sip your tea, fingers curled around the warmth. And you realize there is nothing left to add. No more pages to write. No more ghosts to chase. Only this breath. Only this night. Only this peace. You lean back, close your eyes, and for the first time truly you rest. You begin to disappear in the kindest way. Not from the world, but from the eyes of those who once saw you as a symbol. The interviews grow fewer. The letters slow. The book once passed hand to hand now rests quietly on shelves. And you are grateful. Because it means your story has been heard. And now you can go back to living the parts of it no one asked about. The parts without waves, the parts without rescue. You move to a smaller flat 3 floors up above a flower shop that opens at dawn and smells of earth and beeswax. The windows are narrow but generous with light. On the sills you grow mint and lavender in cracked porcelain mugs. A tabby cat begins visiting in the mornings, purring against your ankle's tail like a question mark. You name him Marconi. He never answers but always returns. Your days stretch quiet and long. Mornings with tea and the newspaper. Afternoons spent walking the narrow paths through the botanical gardens where you sit beneath budding trees and read novels you once skimmed as a girl. You take notes in margins now. Not analysis, just reactions. A single word true next to a line about memory. A tiny star beside a passage about grief and weather. Some days you volunteer at the reading room. You shelve books. You offer directions. You help elderly men find their way to maps of oceans they once crossed. You like the dust there, the slowness, the steady breath of pages turning in quiet corners. You no longer tell people your story unless they ask. Even then you only share what they can hold. A girl once asked if it was cold that night. You said yes. She asked if you were scared. You nodded. Then she asked if you sang. That last one caught you. No, you said. I listened. It was enough. You no longer write every night, but you still light the candle. You sit by the window and let the shadows move slowly across your walls. Sometimes you speak aloud to no one in particular. You'd like it here, you say to your husband's photograph. There's always time in the bread. Or Evelyn sent a postcard. She's taller now. The world outside rushes on. Wars bloom and fade. Inventions reshape streets, skies kitchens. But you live in the quiet, the stillness between chapters. You become what you always wanted to be, the witness, not the headline. One morning you wake to a letter on your doorstep. The envelope is thin. Inside is a formal invitation from a maritime memorial foundation. They're hosting an anniversary gathering, a centennial remembrance of the sinking. Survivors, descendants, historians. They ask if you'll attend. Just attend. Not speak, not present. Just be there. You think on it. You fold the invitation and place it on your writing desk. That night you walk to the harbor. The wind is soft. The moon floats full and pale above the water. You stand at the railing and remember the first time you stood like this, young, uncertain, dressed for a voyage, unaware of how far memory can stretch. You whisper to the sea. Not words, just breath. You don't decide right away. You wait for the silence to answer. When it doesn't, you smile. You walk home. You pet the cat. You sleep without dreams. And in the morning you write a single sentence in your notebook. I have already said everything that needed to be said. The invitation stays on your desk for a week. You look at it every morning as you pass the window, pour your tea water, the mint. It doesn't pressure you. It simply waits like a question you're not yet ready to answer. You don't mind it being there. It belongs among the quiet things. When you finally decide, it isn't with drama. You don't rehearse a speech or pack a suitcase with trembling hands. You simply place the invitation back in its envelope, tuck it into your satchel, and take the early train. The memorial is held in a coastal town farther north. One that still smells of salt and coal, though the ships have changed. Now they hum instead of roar. They glide instead of groan. But the harbor remains gray and cold, with the wind always arriving from somewhere far away. You're met at the station by a woman named Margaret. She's younger than you'd imagined, but her eyes are steady. She doesn't ask for stories. She helps you into a car, drives slowly along the shoreline, points out the old docks. That's where the Carpathia would have docked if she'd come here, she says. You don't correct her. It doesn't matter. At the small hotel, your name is written in gold ink on a welcome letter. There's a vase of white roses in the lobby. Most of the guests are younger, the children and grandchildren of those who were lost or saved. You recognize the look in their eyes, the hunger to connect with something that always lived just beyond the edge of their family photo albums. You attend the first gathering quietly. There's a hall wood-paneled warm with portraits along the walls. The moderator reads out names, one by one. Names of the rescued, names of the lost, names with ages beside them, names with no known relatives. When your name is spoken, there's a pause, a subtle turn of heads, not a gasp, not a ripple, just a shift in air. You incline your head gently. No one rushes toward you, no one invades your space. They give you the one thing you've always cherished most: room to breathe. Afterward, a young man approaches you in the courtyard. He carries a notebook, though he never opens it. My great-grandfather was in the engine room, he says. We never found out what happened, just that he wasn't on the lists. You ask his name. He tells you. You nod, and then you say he was brave. The young man swallows hard. That's what I always hoped. You place your hand on his just for a moment. Sometimes that's enough. That night, there's a candlelit procession to the water. Dozens walk together down the pier, each holding a single white candle in a paper ring. The wind tries to snuff them, but most endure. You walk near the end of the line. You don't speak, you just listen. To the soft footfalls, to the wind's steady breath, to the sound of waves pressing gently against the pilings like someone knocking from beneath. At the edge of the pier, the names are read again. You close your eyes. You do not cry. You have cried enough. Instead, you release your candle onto the water. It drifts slowly, joining the others, a sea of tiny flames moving silently across the dark. You stay until they vanish, long after the others return to the warmth, long after the names fade into mist. And when you finally turn to leave, you whisper thank you to the sea, for giving back what it could, for holding what it could not. You return home to a quiet that feels different now, not emptier, just wider. The flat above the flower shop greets you with the scent of drying lavender and sun-warmed floorboards. The cat Marconi blinks at you from the windowsill, tail twitching, then resumes his nap as if you'd only stepped out for milk. You unpack slowly. One shawl, a folded program from the memorial, a new notebook, a gift from the organizers, still blank bound in soft navy linen. You place it on your desk, but don't open it. Not yet. Instead, you return to your familiar rhythms. You volunteer again at the reading room. You greet the baker each morning with a nod. You sip your tea from the same chipped mug, now more comfort than vessel. But something within you has shifted. Not a dramatic change, no new purpose declared, no grand reckoning, just a softer relationship with the past. You begin speaking more, not in public halls, not with rehearsed words, but in smaller, warmer spaces. A group of students from a nearby college invites you to a seminar on historical memory. They don't know you were on the Titanic. They've only read Below the Silence. They ask how it felt to write it. You say, like walking through fog with a lantern. They nod slowly. Later, one of them, a girl with ink-stained fingertips, asks if you ever think about the sea now. All the time you answer, are you afraid of it? No, you say, I respect it. You find yourself reading your own words again, not with pride, but with curiosity. They feel distant now, like letters from a past version of you. You underline new lines. You question old ones. You begin to see your own survival, not just as endurance, but as conversation. Ongoing. Changing. One morning you receive a letter with no return address. Inside is a photograph, not of a person, but of a tree. Tall, solitary, growing beside a quiet field. On the back, only 6 words planted for you, still thriving. You smile. You don't know where the tree is or who planted it, but you imagine standing beneath its branches. You begin writing again, not memoir, not history. Letters. To no one. To everyone. You write to your husband. You write to the baby in the lifeboat. You write to the girl who asked if you ever sang. You write to the men who never made it out of the engine room. Each letter begins with "Dear One" and ends with "I remember." You don't send them. You fold them and place them in a box near the window. Sometimes on windy days the box rattles softly as if someone inside it has stirred. One evening while sweeping the floor you pause. A patch of sunlight rests on the far wall. Dust dances inside it. You stand still, watching as if the light might carry a message. You think about that night on the sea, the silence after the ship went down. The cold so deep it stole the breath from your chest. The child sleeping on your lap. The way your heart kept beating when it had no reason to. You wonder if you'll ever feel anything as real again. Then the cat brushes your ankle. And you realize you already have. Not in waves of drama, but in small things. A stranger's touch on your shoulder. A book passed from hand to hand. A tree planted in silence. And you still here. Still breathing. Still walking toward the light. Your world grows smaller, and that is not a tragedy. It becomes more distilled, more intentional. Fewer people. Slower mornings. The joy of a cup of tea held warm in both hands. The sunlight that moves across the walls of your flat like a tide you no longer need to name. You still walk to the harbor, though now with a cane. The cobblestones are less forgiving to your knees, but the breeze remains kind. The sea still speaks in the same voice, and now finally you understand its language. You've stopped keeping track of anniversaries. The dates don't matter the way they once did. What matters is the moment you are in the hush of an empty street at dusk, the way the cat curls against your side when you read the laughter of the bakery girl as she drops her keys and tries to pretend it never happened. You live with softness. A new neighbor moves into the flat below yours. A young man, perhaps in his 20s, with thick glasses and a radio that plays symphonies late into the evening. He knocks on your door one day with a package mistakenly delivered to his door. When you thank him, he peers into your flat. "You're the woman from that book," he says, a little breathless. You nod. He blushes. "I read it when I was 16. I think it made me want to study history." You smile and invite him in for tea. He visits often after that, not in search of stories, but for company. He brings you pears in the fall. Newspaper clippings he thinks you'd enjoy. A cassette player so you can listen to Chopin while you cook. Sometimes you sit together in silence, listening to rain tick against the windows, both of you cradling steaming mugs. You never ask about his past. He never pries into yours. One afternoon, he brings you a gift. A framed photograph of the sea taken from a ship's deck. It's angled so that the horizon tilts slightly as though caught mid-breath. "I thought you might miss the view," he says. You place it on your writing desk. The photograph doesn't stir sadness. It brings you stillness. Later that week, you go through the box of letters, the ones you wrote but never sent. You unfold them one by one. You read them all. Some make you smile, others catch in your throat. One to your younger self simply says, "You don't have to be strong. Just keep moving." You seal each one in a fresh envelope and write names on them, even if those names are only symbols. Then one morning you take them to the harbor. You find a wooden bench near the end of the pier, not your usual spot, but one with a clear view of the open water. The sky is pale blue. The waves are quiet. You sit. One by one you tear each letter into strips, letting the wind carry the pieces. They scatter like snow. Some fall into the sea. Some catch on the rail. Some rise. You watch them disappear. And for the first time you feel light. That night you dream, not of the ship, not of water, but of music. A violin playing in the dark, its sound curving upward into stars. When you wake, the dream lingers not in fear, but in gratitude. You open a new notebook. You write, "I am not the girl on the deck, not the woman in the boat, not the name in the paper. I am all of them, and more, and less, and still here." You underline only that last line, because it is enough, because it always was. Winter returns with little ceremony. The first snow arrives overnight, quiet and unannounced, dusting the rooftops and blanketing the narrow streets in pale silence. You wake to it like one might wake to an old friend, familiar, unhurried, not needing to explain itself. Outside your window, the trees stand bare, their limbs tracing fragile lines across the gray sky. You light the candle early these days, not because of darkness, but because the flame feels like company. Your flat has become a kind of sanctuary. The shelves are lined with old books and tea tins, the desk cluttered with pens that still work, and papers too beloved to throw away. The cat sleeps most of the day now, curled like a question you no longer need to answer. The radio plays softly in the background, violins mostly. You've begun writing again. Not stories, not letters, but single lines. Phrases that come to you in the steam of the kettle or the hush of your morning steps. You scribble them on napkins, grocery lists, the backs of library receipts. No one remembers the storm, only the light that followed. She floated not to survive but to become. Some echoes don't fade. They become the room. You don't collect them. You let them go. You let them live wherever they fall. One morning you receive a package. No return address. Inside a book. Your book. A new edition. Hardbound. Dark blue with silver lettering. Below the silence, reprinted for its anniversary. A quiet note tucked inside your words have carried farther than you think. You run your fingers over the spine. You don't open it. Not yet. Instead, you place it beside the photograph of the sea. Two fragments of the same memory now resting in peace beside one another. You go walking that afternoon. Slow, careful steps through a city softened by snow. Children build forts. A couple skates hand in hand along the frozen canal. The bakery is lit from within its windows, fogged with the breath of warm bread and laughter. You stop in front of a shop that sells maps. In the window, a nautical chart of the North Atlantic. You step inside. The shopkeeper nods and gestures toward the back wall where old maps are displayed under glass. You find one dated 1912. The Atlantic stretched wide with faint pencil markings tracing the Titanic's planned route. You press your hand gently to the glass. You whisper, "I remember." The shopkeeper hears. He doesn't ask. He only says, "She was beautiful, wasn't she?" You nod. Later in the reading room, a girl no older than 12 asks if you've ever been at sea. You pause. Then say yes. She asks if it was scary. You smile sometimes. She leans in, curious. "Did you sing to keep calm?" You laugh softly. "No, I listened." She seems to like that. She goes back to her book. You stay a little longer watching the snow fall through the tall windows, and you realize something. You've stopped waiting for anything to be different. Not because you've given up, but because you've arrived. This life, small, slow, filled with ordinary beauty, is no longer a waiting room. It is the home you never expected but always needed. You walk back through the snow as the sun begins to fall. Street lamps flicker on. The bakery closes its shutters. The world hushes itself again. Back in your flat, you brew tea. You sit by the window, and for the first time in a very long while, you don't think of water or fire or ice. You think of warmth, and how somehow you carried it with you all along. You begin to give things away, not out of necessity, and not all at once. Just quietly, deliberately. One teacup to the librarian's daughter who always admired its painted violets. A scarf to the young woman who brings you apricot jam from her garden. A pair of wool gloves to the boy who walks to school without them, pretending not to feel the cold. It isn't about letting go. It's about passing on. You've come to understand something simple and unshakable. We don't take memories with us. We place them into objects, into stories, into hands that will carry them forward in ways we'll never see. One snowy morning, you find yourself at the museum. You haven't been back in months. The halls feel smaller than you remember, the ceilings lower, the corners quieter. The curator greets you with surprised joy. We didn't think he begins, then stops smiling. We're glad. He leads you to the archive. There, in a glass case newly installed near the maritime wing, you see your own handwriting. A page from your first notebook, the one written in candlelight. It's been framed behind soft lighting, the ink carefully preserved. Visitors pass it slowly. Some pause, some don't. It doesn't matter. You sit on the bench nearby unnoticed and read your own words as if for the first time. There is silence that drowns and silence that saves. You breathe. Then rise. Back in your flat, you spend the afternoon organizing your letters. Not the ones to strangers, but the ones you wrote for yourself. The ones you never meant anyone to read. The ones that helped you build a life from the inside out. You stack them gently. You tie them with soft twine. And then you write one more. To the woman I have become. You were not made of water or fire or steel. You were made of breath, and breath was always enough. You tuck it on top of the bundle. You place the stack in a small cedar box and slide it under the bed. That evening, you fall asleep with a storm whispering at the window. You dream again, not of the ship but of a garden, a wide field golden with sun. People moving through it, not faces you know, but ones you trust. You stand among them. You are not waiting. You are not remembering. You are simply there, breathing, present, alive. In the morning, your neighbor leaves a tin of shortbread at your door. You smile. The cat paces by the window. The teapot whistles. You begin your day, not with urgency, not with longing, but with peace. Because somewhere in the deep of you a truth has anchored. You were not lost. You were never lost. Only drifting. Until you found the shore inside yourself. You wake to birdsong. Not the sharp cry of gulls over open sea, but the soft chatter of sparrows on the rooftop just outside your window. Their voices rise with the light, small, confident, utterly alive. You lie still beneath your blanket, letting the sound pour into the corners of the room, into the corners of your chest. The world has not changed, but you have. The kettle hums, and you move through your morning as if each gesture is a form of prayer. Washing your hands, buttoning your sweater, placing your mug gently on the windowsill. You feel the weight of each moment not as a burden, but as proof. It's been years since the ship, decades now. But it no longer feels like a separate life. It's folded into you, not sharp at the edges, but worn soft with touch. A memory, yes, but also a teacher. A wound, yes, but also a guide. You sit at your desk and open the Navy notebook, the one they gave you at the memorial. There are only a few pages left. You write, "I used to wonder how many times one could be broken before becoming something else. I know now. We don't break, we transform." You underline it once. You pause, then write another line beneath it. Survival is not the story. Becoming is. You close the book, this time without hesitation. Later that afternoon you go walking. The sun is bright but not harsh. The streets shimmer with the afterglow of recent rain puddles catching clouds and chimney smoke. You pass the bakery and wave. You stop at the corner flower stand and choose a single stem pale yellow. You don't ask its name. You place it in a glass jar on your desk, a gift to no one, or perhaps to yourself. The radio plays softly a waltz you don't recognize but find yourself humming anyway. You look around your home. It is small, but it is full. Books and letters, photographs and teacups. A cat curled into a crescent on the chair, light spilling across the rug in the shape of a window pane, and everywhere traces of you. You in the handwriting tucked into drawers. You in the cups chipped with time. You in the story someone might one day tell, not because they knew you, but because they read your words and felt less alone. That evening you sit again by the harbor. You no longer count the ships. You simply watch them arrive and depart, sails full, hulls steady. You watch the children skip stones, the lovers whisper, the wind carry petals across the surface of the water. You let it all pass through you, not as a loss, as a song. And in the fading blue of twilight you think, there is nothing more to write, because everything has already become. The sea once your shadow is now your echo. The silence once unbearable is now your truest voice. And you once a girl in a boat, once a woman alone in a new city, once a survivor unwilling to speak, are now something else entirely. You are a witness, a lantern, a shoreline. And tomorrow, whether anyone remembers or not, the tide will come, and you will be at peace. The day you choose to stop writing is quiet. There is no ceremony. No final sentence planned. The notebook lies open on your desk beside the window, its blank page catching morning light like the surface of a calm sea. You stare at it for a long while, pen in hand, then gently close the cover without marking a single word. It isn't that you've run out of things to say. It's that the silence now says enough. Outside the sky is cloudless. The harbor below glistens, waves moving in slow circular breath. You hear the laughter of children from the schoolyard nearby. You hear a dog bark, then another. You hear the bells from the church tower mark the hour, slow and low and warm. You rise with care. Your hands move more slowly these days, but they still remember every gesture, folding the blanket at the foot of your bed, rinsing the tea mug, tracing your fingers along the spine of a book you've read 3 times but can't bear to give away. You glance at the photograph on the desk, the one of him. His eyes always just slightly off camera, as though caught in the middle of a thought. You nod to him, a greeting, a goodbye. A lifetime tucked inside a look. In the afternoon you walk one last time to the harbor. It takes longer than it used to. The cane clicks against cobblestones. Your coat hangs loose around your shoulders, and the wind carries the faintest scent of salt and lilac. The season is shifting again, not yet summer, no longer spring. The kind of day that lives in between. You find your bench. It's still there, worn smooth now by decades of waiting and watching. You sit. The sea stretches out before you, wide and unafraid. And in that great silent moment you remember everything. The scrape of the iceberg, the tilt of the deck, the gasp of cold air, the hand you let go, the child you held, the voice that never came again. But you also remember the sun warming your hands on the Carpathia's deck, the sound of your name spoken kindly, the softness of a borrowed blanket, the way a girl smiled when you read her a poem, the candle flickering in the window. You close your eyes. You do not think of endings. You think of light. Because that's what stayed after everything else. And as the tide kisses the edge of the pier below you, as the wind stirs your scarf, like an old friend brushing past, you feel it, that deep, quiet knowing. You have lived, you have carried, you have loved, you have survived, and at last you are full. You let your head tilt slightly toward the sun. You let your hands rest open and empty in your lap. You let the world go on without you for just a moment. And in that moment, still golden complete, the sea holds you one final time. Not to take you, but to say thank you.